Yeah. Apparently, they think it was just probably dehydration and overheating. So, Jean's taking her home, and unless someone takes pity on me, I'll have to walk home. Thank you. My prayers are answered. So I'm a little distracted, you may well imagine, but I think there's still a message that God has for us today. I don't know if it's racial profiling. I don't think it is, but historically, Jewish people have always been accused of answering questions with a question. For example, there was an interviewer that was talking to a rabbi, and he asked him, he says, "Why is it that you always answer a question with a question?" And the rabbi said, "Why do you ask?" But anyway, anytime I approach a passage of Scripture, that just automatically comes to my mind. I just start asking questions. So turn to Matthew chapter 18, and Laura's going to come and read it for us. And I want you, as she reads the passage, to think about questions that you might have from this passage. Any sort. Matthew chapter 18, starting with verse 1.
At that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child whom he placed among them, and he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes a humble place, becoming like this child, is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. Such things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come. If your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father in heaven. What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. If a brother or sister sins, go and point out the fault, just between the 2 of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take 1 or 2 others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive someone who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. The servant fell on his knees before him. 'Be patient with me,' he begged, 'and I will pay back everything.' The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay back what you owe me," he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, "Be patient with me, and I will pay you back." But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said, "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive a brother or sister from your heart.
Thank you. So here's some of the questions that I have. Ones I'm not going to deal with this morning. So he starts out with this sweet little story about kids, and then he jumps over to cutting off arms and poking out eyes and going to hell. What's with that? And then he has this story about these sheep. And, I like the fact that he goes off and takes care of the one that's wander and can't take care of itself. But what about the 99? I mean, if you got 99 that are just sitting there on the hillside, what's going to happen to them? So then there's this part that if your brother or sister sins, you're supposed to point out their fault. "Hey, Frank, you're getting a little heavy there. Maybe you shouldn't have a muffin. You better have a carrot stick." Is that really our job in life, to point out each other's sin? And then he uses the word church. They didn't even know what a church was when Jesus was talking. Why did they translate that church? Is that really what it means? Binding on earth and bounding in heaven. What in the world does that mean? I've heard it used in some really unusual prayers. But what does it actually mean? And then there's this verse that says, "If two of you agree on anything, it will be done for you." I love that because Gina and I decided we need a brand new Tesla. And we're in agreement. So that's going to happen, obviously. So then we go down to this story about this king who's very gracious and kind. But when things don't go the way that he wants, he turns them over to jail and has them tortured until they pay it back. So here's your assignment. I want you to take this, I want you to go through this chapter this week and pick out one of those questions, and I want you to research it. And the way that I deal with questions is, first of all, I spend several days just mulling on them and praying about it and asking God, what does this mean? What does this mean to them? Because I want to understand it in the context. I want to know what Jesus was saying to them. It doesn't make a difference if I just translate it to today first. I first of all need to know what Jesus was saying. What is it that exactly that Jesus was trying to say to them? And then beyond that, what's the message in it for me? So find a question that you don't know the answer to, one of those or some other in that chapter. And then if you have some commentaries, might be a good idea to read a commentary. The internet has a wealth of information. Not all of it's good information. Just because something's on the internet or just because something's in a book or even in a commentary doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. There are lots of great commentaries that I love that in certain instances I say, I don't agree with that at all. So sort through your question, find out what you think it means, and then next Sunday in Sunday school we're going to talk about these questions, all right? You're going to do a report, all right? That's sort of your part of this. We're in this together, right? It's not all me, it's us. So if you can't stay for Sunday school, you can just email me your answer, and we'll discuss it. And I'll give you a grade. But this morning I want to talk about the first part of the passage where he takes this little child, and the little child is a toddler, probably about Olive's age, 2, 3, 4, preschool. It's a specific word for a small child and not an older child. And in Jesus' day, children were children only till they were about 11 or 12, and after that they were just considered adults. There was no such thing as adolescence. There's some good things about that and some bad things about that. I think that there's some very healthy things about having adolescence, and also some things that are possibly not. But Jesus, in this statement, he is just a tender scene. And interestingly enough, just in the next chapter, it's only a chapter later. I don't know in the timeline of thing how far later, but some people are bringing children for Jesus to bless. Maybe they saw this and they liked it, and the disciples are shooing them away. And Jesus says, "What? Didn't you just hear what I had to say?" So it's interesting that they forget so quickly. But he brings this little child, and you just have this picture of him sitting on a rock there and cuddling with this little child, and maybe starting to tell it a story or something. I mean, I just love that picture. It's just, my fondest moments in life are when when Bowie runs over with a book, and she signs to me book. She wants me to read her a book. And she has specific books that she wants me to read, and they have to be read multiple times. And when I read a book, it's never the same. So I rarely read what the book says. But I digress. But anyway, the point of it is he says that you need to become like a little child in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. And let me also just reiterate that when Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven, he's talking about your present existence and your future. So he's really talking about not only eternity, but he's talking about how you live your life. And probably most importantly to us is that aspect. How do we live our life in a way that Jesus is talking about, that he's reflecting on, that has that childlike characteristic? And let me also make a distinction between childlike and childish. When we were first married, I remember the very first fight that we had. It was over money. And the reason it was over money was because I came into the place we were living in. Jean was balancing the checkbook. And I told her that that was the man's job. And as head of the house, I would take care of the finances. And I know, I know, I feel the same way now. I think, what a jerk. But that was my perception of my role as the husband, the caretaker, the provider, and, spiritual leader of the home, that I had to maintain the books. Fortunately, I got over that. My wife does that now. And she does it so much better than me. I remember another childish thing that I did early on in our relationship. Is her parents wanted to give her a very generous gift. And I was offended at the size of the gift. It seemed inappropriately generous. And to me, I look back at that and I go, what was my problem? But it was just a matter that I had not become a man. I was still living in some instances as a child. And so we're not talking about being childish. And unfortunately, in our society, there are many people that never grow out of childhood. In some ways, they're still extremely childish. And probably all of us have areas of our life where God will say, that's kind of childish. The way that you're responding to that is pretty childish. The fact that you're clinging to that right that you have, that view of life that you have, that view of your perspective of yourself, that's pretty childish. But he does want us to be childlike. So what does childlike mean? One of the things that strikes me about children is that they really have no shame. And a couple weeks ago, I preached a sermon on the impact of shame upon us and how that has had such a negative impact on us and continues to. But children, they're not affected by shame. And one of my fond memories is of our kids, after they would get out of the bathtub, inevitably they would run through the house naked, yelling, and we'd all make a big fuss about it. Hey, there's naked kids in the house or whatever. And they'd laugh and giggle and run back and get dried off and leave a wet trail. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all join nudist colonies or run around naked. I mean, that sounds terrible and scary to me. But there is something about that freedom from shame that is just so refreshing, and it makes me want to get all aspects of shame, inappropriate shame, and out of my life. And there's a distinction between shame and modesty. I think modesty is important, but there are still some areas of shame that are embedded in my life that are just in there, and yours as well. And so rooting those out is important. So that's something which we can become more childlike. The other thing about children is that they know what they need, and they're not afraid to ask for it. And I so appreciate that some of you on Sunday mornings will come in and say, I just need a hug today. They'll come up to me and say, can I just have a hug today? I remember when Joel was just a toddler, and I distinctly remember him coming into the room, primarily to his mother, and say, I need some hold. That was one of his classic lines. Mom, I need some hold. And to just know in your heart that that's what you need. Bowie does it too, but she uses different phrase. She uses squeeze. I need some squeeze. And so it's just so sweet and love to apply the remedy to that condition. But they simply know it. One of the things that Bowie is guilty of is sucking her thumb, and she plays with her hair while she sucks her thumb. Curiously, it's the exact same thing that Candace did when she was that age. And obviously she didn't learn it from her mother. Her mother doesn't do it anymore. So I don't observe her doing it. And in fact, Candace said she did it until she was like 11 or 12. And so it was a way of self-comfort. Comforting herself. She knows what she needs, and she feels no qualms about sitting there sucking her thumb, hopefully in Grandpa's lap, and playing with her hair. I don't know what that is, but there's something about it. And many of us desperately need at times to be held. We need some affection, but we suffer in silence because it's a scary thing. It's frightful. It's uncomfortable. It's not something we're used to. In my family growing up, my family was not demonstrative at all. I cannot remember ever hugging my parents or my siblings growing up. I just don't remember. Maybe it happened. I have no memory of it. But when I walked into Jean's family, there was hugging all the time. And it was just like, there was this tension, like, is this okay? But I kind of like this. I don't know if it's okay to like this, but I really do. And this is just so different. There was something so appealing about it. And, if you put your emotions in a box and lock them there long enough, you'll basically not even know you have those emotions. That's true of men and crying or showing any kind of emotion if you do that. But you know what? God can find the keys and begin to unlock those. And your life will be so much richer if you're able to express yourself and to have those deep-seated needs met. The other thing about kids is that life is always anticipation. They're thinking about what's going to happen. And I think one of the sad things about us, when we're teenagers, all we can do is wait until we're older. We're always, I remember through junior high, I could just think, I can only wait till I get out of here and become an adult and get married, and then life will start. And then the funny thing is that you get to that age and then you start to look back. And the older you get, the further back you look. And so there's always this sense of life is not living in the present, not enjoying where I am, but always wanting to be something or someone other than I am. And children are not like that. They just love to be in the present. Whatever's happening, that's great. As long as they're not bored and as long as they're not eating lima beans. It's great. And there's a sense of that is kingdom living. It's waking up and being grateful for who you are at the exact moment you are. I don't wish that I was a day younger or a day older. I just really enjoying the age that I am. And I think there is something about our society that constantly reinforces that you should be younger, you should be healthier, you should be wiser, maybe older if you're young. And there's this constant discontentment with who we are. We need to resist that and just say, you know what? I wasn't designed to look that age. I'm this age. This is how I'm supposed to look. This is my build. This is the body God gave me, who I am. I'm going to be a child and enjoy it. And let me also just say that there are some people that are constantly looking at all the things wrong with their life. And in a sense, hating one's life is an aspect, or being discontent with one's life is an aspect of hatred toward God or being discontent with God. It's basically saying, I don't like how you made me, and in essence that means I don't like that part of you. So we need to honestly understand that about that expression and feeling. Another thing about toddlers, Jean is in California all week, and on Friday, they had a birthday party for Olive at a park, and there were all these myriad of kids because Olive makes friends everywhere she goes. And Jean was just sitting there enjoying the interaction between all of these kids. And you know, when you're a toddler, everyone's a potential friend. You never look at someone and think, oh, I don't want to hang out with them. They're the wrong shape or size or talk funny or whatever. Everyone's a potential friend as a toddler. They simply look at life and they see people as friends to be made. And we tend to have a circle of friends that we're comfortable with, and it's a bit of a challenge to stretch ourselves beyond that. And I'm not suggesting that everybody on the planet needs to be your friend, but I think that as you walk through life with that perspective, it deepens and makes your life so much richer. My father was a master of that. Of course, he was in education, he was a principal, and so it was sort of his job to interact with people. But I can remember being with him in public, and wherever he would see someone, he'd walk over and just start a conversation with them, start talking about their life. And I was just always so astounded that he would do that, because he was just sincerely interested in people and found them fascinating and wanted to know about them. And that is childlike, I believe. I believe that is the type of childlike that Jesus is talking about, enjoying people. And these people are some of the people that God has given you to enjoy. And some of us are pretty peculiar people. And but we will make great playmates. I guarantee it. Another thing about children is they know where the safe places are. this child in Jesus' arms. I mean, is there any place in existence that could be safer in the arms of the Creator? They know where safety is. And you should know places of safety in your life, but ultimately you should know also that the ultimate place of safety is in God's arms. And even the safest relationships you have will never be as safe as the relationship in the arms of God. So then he goes on, he talks about people that are stumblers. And let me remind you that in Jesus' time, a form of speaking was using hyperbole, and hyperbole is where you use exaggerated statements to make a point. And so there's hyperbole running all through this. But also remind you that the people that he is speaking to are living around the Sea of Galilee. And most of them are connected or are actually involved in being out on that lake. And, it hasn't been until recent times that we really understood what was down in the depths of the ocean. It was a mysterious, dark, and scary place. And it probably still is for most people. I remember when I was training in scuba diving, it was really easy for me to start at the shore and to swim out to deeper water because you could just see the bottom all the way out. But I remember the first time I dropped off of a boat and the water was dark and murky and you could see nothing down there. And the thought of swimming down into that was honestly terrifying. But after I did it the first time and thought, oh, there's a bottom down here. It doesn't just go on for eternity. But in this day and age, one of the most terrifying ways to die was to drown. And they're working with nets, and some of these nets have heavy weights on them. And so if you fell overboard and got tangled in your net and sank to the bottom, can you just envision that? Terrifying. So this picture that he has is a terrifying picture. But what is probably most important is what sorts of things happen that cause stumbling in the life of somebody who is pursuing the attributes of a child. Well, obviously our society does a lot of things. There are ads and commercials that are constantly trying to make us feel bad about ourselves, trying to make us feel like if we only had something better, that we would be better people. There's an ad that I just saw. I don't see very many ads because I don't watch very much TV. But I was watching the Olympics, and this ad came on for Cadillac. And it is one of the most evil commercials, honestly, that I've ever seen. It's not evil in the sense of violence or of immorality. It's evil in the pretentiousness of who we think we are as Americans. And it's about a man who deserves a Cadillac because he doesn't take any vacation, because he lives in a nice house, and because he's an American. The rest of the world, they simply don't have the same prestige or the privilege that we as Americans do. And I watched that and I just went, that is so horrible. I mean, I don't have a problem with somebody buying a Cadillac. If you want to spend your money that way, maybe it's a good investment. But to do so in a way that says that you're better than everyone else, that's just horrible. But see, society is constantly telling us that, and in all honesty, there's some factions of being an American that's that way as well. The rest of the world doesn't think very highly of us, and often because we're arrogant, and they're right. We don't approach the rest of the world humbly. We think we're better than anybody else. So the world, society teaches us those kinds of attitudes. Don't see the world as potential friends. See them as somebody beneath you that they're not worth befriending and loving and caring for. I was thinking in the Olympics, I read a really great editorial about America's response to Russia, and I should send it around to you because it's really worth reading. But in the editorial, he talks about us that have grown through the Cold War, and many of us still carry the baggage from that. because our whole growing up years, in junior high and high school, we lived in terror that they were going to bomb us, that they hated us, they were going to bomb us. And so we still have those prejudices against them. And many of those prejudices actually traveled to the Olympics. And this journalist talked about a lot of those American prejudices toward Russia and the fact that we don't see the greatness and the wonder and the beauty of Russia because of that. And boy, it just kind of, I read it and I thought, that's honestly true. I hadn't really thought about it, but I do have some prejudice against Russia because of living through that time and running out in the hall and duck and cover and all those things. Well, it isn't just the world that causes us to stumble as children. The church does it as well. And we do it because we don't love everyone, because we do the opposite of loving everyone, that we specifically choose some people that we want to connect with, and we avoid some people that we don't want to connect with. We do it when we wear masks, when we really are hurting and we had a difficult week and we walk in the door and someone says, "How are you doing?" And we just lie and say, "I'm fine." Rather than saying, it's been kind of a hard week. But there's that fear. Well, what are they going to respond? How are they going to say? We do it when, in fact, we don't ask good questions. Even asking that question, "How are you doing?" really isn't a question that wants to know how someone's doing. If you really want to know how someone's doing, you need to learn to ask better questions than that. How are you feeling today? What are you struggling with this week? Have you had anything this week that's been really great or not so great? I mean, there's just so many different questions that tell someone that you're not just greeting them, you're interested in them. And I realize that you can't engage in deep conversations at every moment, but maybe that'd be a goal for every Sunday, to have at least one, where you just took one person and just said, "Just tell me, what's